How much coffee should I put in my roasting machine? This is part 3 of 4 in a series on coffee roasting batch size. If you missed videos 1 and 2 with Shelby Williamson and Scott Rao respectively, go back and watch those and I'll put the links in the description below. This video is my interview with Cameron Heath. Cameron works at Counterculture Coffee, currently roasts on 2 big machines. One is a 70 kilogram Loring roaster and one is a 90 kilogram Probat. Cameron also has extensive experience on smaller roasters as well. Cameron's key batch size insights in this video include a perspective on production roasting at big volumes, using batch size to manage conductive and convective heat transfer, his approach to roasting single origin coffees versus how he roasts blends, and a lot more. But I'll let him do the talking. On to the interview. Thanks so much for joining me on this conversation about batch sizes. You've roasted on many different machines. Why is batch size important for a roaster?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's like, if you have too much coffee in your drum, you're going to lead to scorching, tipping, all the bad stuff. Underweight, I think basically your roast will get away from you. This just basically leads to inconsistency, which would lead to inconsistent cups of coffee. So I think coffee roasters do like to have some kind of consistency. So keeping batch size at a certain size always helps that way. That way you can know how your machine will always react. So that's one thing that's important to me, I guess, as a roaster.
Yeah. And have you found that there's kind of like a range that usually works for minimum batch size and maximum batch size, or does that really depend on the machine you're using?
So I've roasted on 5 kilos and 90 kilos. So there's it's always I'm trying to conceptualize it in a way where it's kind of more general, but I think, if from this scale from counterculture, the most you can put in a batch in a bean, so we have a 90 kilo machine, we roughly put in 195 pounds just for efficiency's sake. And also you can kind of still manipulate that as well. But I think I used to, on a smaller scale, 80% of a batch size. That way you can kind of manipulate that roast a little bit better. And at a smaller size, we had that luxury of being able to do that. But at the size like that right now, it's really just kind of do your modulations and get it out the drum. So
yeah. So on a practical level, sometimes you just have to kind of crank it all the way up to get maximum coffee out the door.
Yeah. So basically, I guess more so you're relying more on good sourcing practices and long-standing relationships, that you have good quality coffee. That way you don't have to actually do a lot to mask any kind of imperfections or whatnot. But when you're at this size, I think today is a 17,000 pound day. It's you don't have time to get fancy. You want basically not say a Nike swoosh roast, but do your little tricks to make it taste good, or put your little mark on it and get it out of the drum. But I think when I was with Revelator, we had smaller batch sizes, and basically I was able to get fancy because we had luxury of time. But
yeah. So would you say that when you're at Revelator is a bit different than now when you're at Counterculture? Do you start with the roast curve that you want to try and hit and kind of go to max batch capacity from there? Or do you kind of start with max batch capacity and see what the roast curve is going to do?
It really depends on what you want to do with the cup of coffee. It's if it's a blend, I'm not super concerned about the nuances of it. If it's a single origin coffee, absolutely, I want to have a lower batch size. That way I can highlight any kind of thing I found in the cupping process, sampling, oh, this had more acidity, this had more sweetness. I can bolster that doing X, Y, and Z in the roast of a smaller batch size way easier than with a full batch size.
So you can manipulate the smaller batch size more easily.
Absolutely.
Cool. And have you found different factors in the roasting machine, whether that's the material of the drum or the airflow that affect kind of how much you can push the batch size?
So say right now we have a Loring 70 kilo versus a 90 kilo Probat. Basically, the 70 kilo of a Loring, you can really do anything. I think it's like high power for sure. But I am kind of overly cautious about overly over drying batches as well. So I would assume a lower batch size on that machine, you will run the risk of drying out your coffee. So you want to be cautious of that versus underweight of a Probat, you're basically just going to scorch whatever coffee you have in there, and it's not going to taste good either way. So it's good. It's beneficial to find what your like medium is for both machinery. Either way, like I think the material is comparable, like cast iron drum, superheated, just like the difference between like a bed of like fire under it rather than convective heating. There's like differences of like heating methods, but at the end of the day, I think batch size plays a bigger part than like convective heating. Hot take, but
I love hot takes.
hot take. But like, yeah, I think everyone really kind of want to drill down on like what's the baton race supposed to look like from conductive to convective heating. It's all the same to me as long as you keep it consistent. So
cool. And you mentioned scorching or the coffee like drying out too much. So what are like the physical and the like flavor in the cup characteristics if you have like an overloaded drum?
I wouldn't know since I haven't experienced that. No, I think it's more of like a charring kind of drying note, very like dull, faded, kind of like flat tones as well. But yeah, it's doesn't happen too often. I haven't really tasted something and been like, oh, that was an overloaded drum or something like that. I know that it's easier to tip things, say that based on the process of the coffee. So say it's a natural whatever, and say you have your 195-pound batch in there, and it won't react the same way as a more dense like washed coffee. So that's something to be mindful of. So say for example, I think we have a batch for the Warren is 150 pounds, but if it's a natural, you might go 130 or so just to give it more convective heating, a little more air to like actually breathe, and that way like you avoid that risk.
Cool. Yeah, that was my next question. If you've found differences in how much you can push it based on like processing method or variety or moisture content and stuff.
Definitely. I think in the past, moisture content definitely played a bigger part of my day-to-day, especially with a smaller roaster like the 15 kilo like Gießen I used to roast on. I would have like certain roast profiles built on to moisture content, because basically the Gießen was like you can manipulate the airflow a lot easier. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I can interact with the coffee there that way. But yeah, I think density was pretty much the same for all the batches I used to do. So yeah, I would definitely change my approach rather than changing the batch size. Because again, keeping my batch size consistent, I will know how my roasters are going to react to that batch size.
Sure. And changing your approach, is that like changing the charge temperature, changing the amount of heat you put like at the beginning? What parts of your approach do you change?
Yeah. So I think I can't remember who taught me this. Maybe it was like Willem Boot or something. It was just like always start where you want to end. So basically, say like I have a 420 start end temperature. I start at that start temperature and basically give it time to like turn over and then apply heat from there. Also, someone taught me the furthest a coffee drops, the more acid it builds up or something like that. So basically we'll give the coffee it's like let it tell its own story, not get in the way of things, and like apply heat when appropriate, not like try to force it to actually roast itself. So it's like more of like a kind of an intuitive kind of like call response way of roasting rather than like hammering it, which is fine too. Nothing wrong with that.
different approaches.
Different approaches. Yeah. So
Yeah. And from a production standpoint, do you pretty much, like at Counterculture, do you pretty much run both your Probat and your Loring at the same batch size like every day? Or do you change based on how much like coffee output you need? Or is it, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're roast to order still. So it's usually, and there's also a smaller roaster, I think a 10 kilo thing called a Salmiak, which we can roast the higher price point coffees on that because it's usually a smaller batch size. But yeah, it stays consistent for the Probats and the Lorens and the Salmiak. I think the Salmiak actually has some variability just based upon the size of the drum. Like you can actually do that with ease and not really change much on the roast profile. But yeah, nothing really changes. But basically, it's like it is kind of built to like for efficiency rather than modulation, just because of the size. I think there's like two different school of thoughts of like you can change a roast profile at a larger size and you can't. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where it's like there is variability, but it's slight.
Sure. And like, what's the purpose of it if, as you said, like that's where you rely on sourcing? If your green coffee is good, and something that I've learned at Black and White for sure, like if your green coffee is good, you can you can do whatever you want and the coffee is going to taste great. I mean, yeah, you can tweak it and it might taste 3% better here or there, but a green coffee is going to taste good.
Absolutely. You shouldn't have to roast the hell out of a coffee. But usually that's not the case. That's a point of privilege, I think, from from my like where I've sourced coffee from. It's just like I've had the luxury of working with higher end products for most of my career. So
yeah, absolutely. Just like a personal question, I guess, do you like more doing like the big production stuff, or do you like when you're at Revelator prefer kind of like dialing it in, tweaking and playing with it?
I like a slow life. I like the slow kind of like more engaged, more like I learn more about the story, learn about the people. I mean, when I was leading the roasting team, it was like, you bring in like 15 coffees a week or a month or something like that. And like it basically the flash in the pan, and then like you realize like, oh yeah, that coffee was great 4 months ago. It's gone now, but yeah. So it's like, yeah, I do enjoy like having a smaller roasting roasting machine, and just getting able to like be a part of the sourcing to the sample roasting to the cupping, and like it was really cool. But like I this right here, same situation where you do have that ability to be more engaged. It just takes, you gotta be like really on it because that coffee's gone in like a week. So
right. If there's one piece of advice that you'd give to a new roaster, like if somebody came to you, like not me doing an interview about an article, but if somebody like caught you at a conference and you had like a second to give a response, and they were like, "Hey, Cameron, what should I do about batch size?" What would be your like one-off response, elevator pitch for batch sizes?
Don't worry about it. Every machine is different. Every machine has different pros and cons. A lot of the times it's basically like it's manufactured weird. It's the gas line. It might be a little warped. Who knows? It might be a hand-me-down. Find what's consistent to you and then just move on from there. But basically, yeah, like I mean, every machine I've had in the past has been finicky. So you just got to find out what consistency works for you, because it won't be the same for every machine.
Yeah, right. Do you know any resources where roasters can like look up batch size, like information on batch size?
I hate to bring him up. Scott Rao.
I mean, I interviewed him for this article, of course, because he's written about it, and
he's written about it. Yeah. Controversial person, but anyway, yeah, Scott Rao. He has the book everyone reads. So I would say absolutely. I haven't read the second one, which probably has a lot more information about like actually roasting. But I would say that's a good starting point for sure. And basically take that and basically not have it as like Bible truth, but let's say some of this applies to me and what does.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and he's warming up on, he just released a natural coffee. He's warming up on Loring. It's
Oh,
like, you
wow.
know, miracles happen.
Yeah. Took
I think he's great
forever.
personally.
Yeah. The internet talks.
It's the lore. It's the lore. I feel like it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Rad. Yeah, well, that's the kind of end of my question list. Do you have anything else that like we didn't talk about regarding batch size, or how roasters can use batch size to get the results that they want?
I don't know. Maybe it's like, I was thinking about it today at some point. I was just like, the idea of utilizing, your batch size for conductive and convective heating. Like theoretically, you could say, the appropriate amount of coffee in a drum, you are leaning more on your conductive heating, and underweight, it's more you're leaning on convective heating.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta, if you want, if you have coffee to play around with, it would be worth playing. Like say you don't have like a fluid bed roaster and you want to have that like experience, you could say I under batch by a certain percentage, not too much obviously, and see if convective heating will brighten up a coffee, clean up a coffee. It might give you more of a vegetal note if it's under roasted, more so because you're not heating the outside of the bean as much as the inside. It's just like numbers in my head floating around, like, this could work, but also, yeah, you don't want to waste coffee for no reason. So
Sure. Yeah, there's always a balance between the theoretical and, oh yeah, this should work, this could work, this might work, and then the practical of maybe it doesn't, or maybe it shouldn't work and it does. Or
exactly.
yeah, I actually just had a question, or I just thought of a question in terms of like, have you ever, not that this has happened to me, been roasting like a, full batch of coffee and accidentally dropped the next batch in the roaster?
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
what happens?
It was awesome. The coffee was fantastic. This is like the only time I've ever done it, because I did it once and I was like, I'm never doing this shit again. Because I was roasting like a Brazilian coffee for some blend, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna whatever, it's fine. I was probably on my phone the entire time, and then I like loaded another like it was like a geisha like Ethiopian and like and I was like, oh my God, I just basically like, I think I just actually, I didn't into the drum, it was into the hopper. So I basically like thought it was a 15-pound batch. It was actually a 30-pound batch. It was a full load, so it's fine. I was like, I can still roast this and not break anything, but I just ruined like, hundreds of dollars of coffee. So that's gonna be something worth, complaining about or talking to someone about. But we ended up basically like putting it into the break room for, a month or so. It was a great coffee. It slapped. Everyone loved it. They didn't want to tell them it was half Brazil, half high-end coffee, but yeah, like it happens.
Yeah, I feel like you could sell that as like a conceptual thing now, like a super high end, super expensive, whatever, and then like something that you usually get for a blender, and to like it keeps costs down, and like mix those two together as like this is a highbrow, lowbrow.
Yeah.
We're being
this
fancy.
my was it the Prince and Popper blend? Is like yeah, you go. Yeah. So no, yeah, it was, I mean, it was literally that. It was basically like a $1.50 coffee versus $100 and some odd dollar coffee. I was like, oh. So accidents happen. Just gotta see how to get around it.
Roll with it. Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, that's as much as I have. Thanks, Cameron, for that valuable insight, and thank all of you for watching. What was your main takeaway? Write it down below or comment any questions you still have about batch size. Then like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more coffee roasting videos. Next week, we'll wrap up this batch size interview series with Bill Kennedy of San Franciscan Roasters. If you missed the first two videos in this series, you can still go back and watch them. I'll put the links in the description below. And of course, make sure to check out Roast Magazine's September-October issue, which has all of the information from these interviews and the other research that I did in the full article about batch size. Thanks for watching. Cheers.